The reaction was mostly one of surprise, especially from people like Democratic Superintendent of Public Instruction Kathy Hoffman, who was not consulted or at least not made aware ahead of time that this announcement was going to come. A lot of people in the education community were preparing to transition back to schools, but maybe later in the month. And so now schools are trying to figure out exactly how they're going to make this transition back to in-person learning with just over a week to prepare. It took a lot of people by surprise.
You're hearing from both Republicans and Democrats, or is it primarily just one side of the aisle?
I'm hearing from both people. I'd say Republicans are pretty excited about this announcement. They're real excited to have kids back in person learning. Democrats, who tend to speak a little more to public school districts, just that's part of what they do as Democrats, are a little less excited about this announcement. They would have preferred to have something done by Superintendent Hoffman or by individual school districts rather than an announcement from the governor.
Education always seems to dominate the headlines during the legislative session, but there are other issues that come up every year: abortion, guns. What's going to take the headlines this session?
Abortion and guns are still a big deal. We obviously saw near the start of session national attention on Arizona because of an abortion bill that would have potentially resulted in doctors being jailed for performing abortions. That bill didn't go anywhere. It would have been thrown out in the courts if it had. But we still have a number of other abortion restrictions moving through the legislature. Some of these, we also have the return of a bill that's been introduced several times before that would try to give state money to crisis pregnancy centers, these organizations that try to persuade women who may be seeking abortions that they should not get the abortion. Instead, they should choose adoption or raising this child as their own.
So far this year, there have been the most bills ever introduced with the slimmest majorities in both chambers. So, let's look into the future just a bit when they sine die here toward the end of the spring. What do you think is going to be one of those issues that has dominated the headlines?
I think the biggest issue this session would be elections, a whole lot of fallout from the 2020 election, in which we saw a number of Republicans who still hold the majority in both chambers, although only by one vote. They're very upset with how the presidential election went down. And obviously, there were concerns about potential fraud, even though that has not been proven in the election. And that's bleeding into a lot of the legislation that we've seen introduced. There have been a record number, not just a record number of bills total introduced this year, but a record number of bills that have to do with elections. And a number of those are on their way, have passed either the Senate or the House, and will be headed for Governor Ducey's desk.
How would you rate the overall climate there, Julia? I mean, some lawmakers are voting from home because of COVID-19, but just in general, there's a different environment atmosphere up there this time around.
Yeah, having lawmakers voting from home or in the Senate, it's mostly voting from their offices on Zoom is a very different environment. You don't have anyone in the buildings themselves. There's no people in the room to testify in the Senate, although some are allowed in the House. There's no classes of school children going on field trips to the Capitol and running around seeing what government looks like. It's a real different situation, but it's not necessarily calmer. I think we've seen that people's tempers are at an even higher level than they'd usually be. That this stress that we've all been under with the COVID pandemic for so long and the tensions that come with having such slim majorities on the Republican side really work their way into this building. It's not uncommon to see people yelling at each other, insulting each other on the floor of the House or Senate, where it might have been a more civil atmosphere in years past.
All right, this year's certainly one for the record books. All right, Julia Shumway from the Arizona Capitol Times, thank you.
Thank you.